Well, hello everybody and welcome to your language teaching and learning channel. My name is Santiago. Today is June 12th, 2020. I'm giving you the date as a reference because in the teaching videos we're talking about reading, and I will be posting this music video once we finish talking about reading because I don't want to interrupt that. Also, the lockdowns and the curfews are beginning to be a little more flexible now, so that means we have time to go out. And that means that within a few days or so I'll be going out to get a haircut, and I thought it would be appropriate to do the music videos while I have long hair. We finished talking about the Beatles discography, but it is important to continue obviously talking about music, but also to be aware of what the reality was at the time, so that we can actually see how much the Beatles and of course other groups evolved and contributed to the evolution of music and to what we have now. I'm sure many people will say, well, you had to be there. Unfortunately, I wasn't there myself, but we are lucky now because we have access to a lot of videos and recordings and articles, so that we can have a reference and we can have a clear idea of what things were like then and what the music scene was like. Just so you have an idea, in 1965, June 11, that would have been yesterday, 55 years ago, the Beatles received news from Buckingham Palace telling them that the Queen would be giving them medals because they were now declared members of the most excellent order of the British Empire, which is definitely a high honor. But just so that you have an idea, one of the reasons that they were getting these medals was, well, one of them was I think that the Prime Minister at the time was a fan of the Beatles, but the other reason was the fact that the revenues that the Beatles were bringing into England were higher than what some of the enterprises in England were producing. So you can see how much influence they had, right? But anyway, let's talk about the hairstyle at the time, okay? Hairstyles at the time were very short hair. You either had a crew cut or you had long hair, but you combed it back with a lot of grease. There's reference to the movie there. You combed it all the way back, so you showed your forehead, your ears, and maybe little sideburns here. And the Beatles, of course, were no exception to this look. In fact, they also had leather jackets, made them look like motorcycle riders at the time. But if you remember, they were also playing in Germany. They were gaining popularity, so they were playing in Germany. And while in Germany, they met a photographer. Her name was Astrid Kirchherr, who unfortunately passed away last month in May. But she was the one who gave them the new look, so to speak. Okay, in the new look they had hair covering their forehead, and for this famous photograph, she gave him a black turtleneck sweater and said, "Put this on," and then she took this very, very famous picture of them, one of the first ones. And then, of course, they became a little bit more formal and evolved into the suit, the famous Beatles suit with no lapel or collar. And of course, the hair got longer too, like covering not only their foreheads but also their ears. And that's why people started calling them the mop tops. Okay, and you can see in this picture here, check out Ringo there. You see? So this influenced other groups and of course people at the time. And another group that was gaining popularity at the time was the Rolling Stones. Now, they were the bad boys of rock and roll, so they already had a little bit longer hair. And of course this influenced in the future rock groups. They all had long hair, especially in the beginning of the 70s. Even John Lennon had long hair. And that lasted up until the beginning of the 80s, I believe, right? And then, of course, let's talk about the music influence, okay? At the time, musicians had been influenced a lot by the blues, and this later evolved into rock and roll. and then you had, you know, Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and they were influences on the Beatles. In fact, the Beatles played some songs from Chuck Berry and Little Richard in some of their early albums, okay? And but Little Richard was a very big influence on them. They would listen to his records and play his music, and while they were in Germany, they had an opportunity. They met him because apparently they were playing in the same place. Now he was already famous and they were gaining popularity, but imagine their surprise, you know, finding their idol playing in the same place they were playing, and they even took pictures with him and everything, you know. So that was a big influence on the Beatles. Unfortunately, Little Richard also passed away last month in May. But anyway, that influenced the Beatles, and of course, with their own creativity, they created new things in music, right? And there are some facts about the time that many people know about, okay? And one of them is the fact that there were some specific broadcasting regulations at the time, okay? And one of them was that the songs could not last longer than 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So if you wanted to become famous, popular, obviously your record had to be played on the radio, but they would not play it if it was longer than 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And that's why if you listen to music from that time, you will realize that some songs are even less than 2 minutes long, but most of them are around 2 minutes, and the most are 30 minutes long. And that was the reason, you see. Another reality of the time was the monophonic sound, okay? To make it simple, monophonic is like you have a microphone and you have the guitars here and you singing and everything goes into the microphone, right? But then that evolved, and then you had the high fidelity and stereophonic sound, which was a new thing, right? And this is why in some of the later albums in the Beatles, see the hair, mop tops, and they mention, you know, full dimensional stereo. Now, what did that mean? That now in this case, stereo is you have two channels, the left and the right. And this is why I recommend it. Remember, listen to the song Hey Bulldog in their Yellow Submarine album, and you can very clearly hear that difference there, right? If you have a good stereo or if you have good headphones, you can hear on the left channel most of the instruments being played, and on the right channel just the voice and a little bit of background instruments, right? So this was kind of like the starting of karaoke, you see. If you have a good amplifying system, you can actually put the right channel in 0 and put some volume on the left channel, and you can sing along as if you were playing with the Beatles, you see. So anyway, they also had, remember, in Sgt. Pepper's and the White Album, they started experimenting with different sounds and music and rhythms. And I recommended you to listen to Revolution number 9 from the White Album. And what do you think? Is that a song? Is that music? What is it? Imagine what people must have thought then, 1960s, right? So they started doing things like that, and of course leading the way for other groups to do similar things. And also what they started experimenting with, well, not experimenting, the thing is that you cannot put a limit on art, and music is art. So you cannot say, okay, your song has to be 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Their later songs, Sgt. Pepper's White Album, you have songs that are longer than that, you see, but because you couldn't cut them. And so other groups started doing the same thing, you see, and this led to even the regulations of the broadcasting to change. And that's why in the early 70s, okay, because a lot of groups started doing longer songs, they changed the 2 minutes and 30 seconds to 3 minutes. And then later on 3 minutes and 30 seconds. I don't know how much it is now, but this is the reason why. If you listen to some songs from that time, the early 70s, you will hear that, you know, you have a long version and a short version. And in the long version, apparently, maybe they said, okay, we're not going to play that on the radio because it's too long. So they said, okay, they took out a couple of verses, and then they had the short version or the radio version, and that was the reason, you see. I'm sure not many people knew about that. And anyway, just you can have a better idea of the influence of the Beatles on people. In one of the interviews, George Harrison had mentioned that he really liked jelly beans. And of course, in the next concert, the fans, I guess, they said, "Oh, fantastic! We're going to show how much we like the Beatles." So he likes jelly beans, and we bring him some jelly beans. You can check out this picture here, in which George Harrison is playing the guitar but trying to avoid getting hit by the jelly beans, and jelly beans all over the stage, which I'm sure the fans meant no harm, but they probably felt like bullets. Okay. Another example is when John Lennon had mentioned, made a comparison between the Beatles and Jesus Christ. And if you check videos from the time, people burning their albums, their pictures, their books, posters, and they called a press conference in which John Lennon had to go and explain what it is that he was trying to say. And the other Beatles are there, we got to support him, we're a group. And I believe Ringo Starr had actually called his attention and told him, "Hey, listen, whatever your opinion is fine, but you got to be careful with what you say, because we all have to answer for it, So anyway, we'll continue talking about music in the next video, and I look forward to you joining me then. Meanwhile, take good care of yourself. Goodbye.